Hi, thanks for attending this presentation. My name is Bob McGeary. I'm a cybersecurity engineer with OpenText, focusing on identity solutions. And today I want to take a look at how to relieve pain points in your identity fabric operations. And basically, anything that we can automate or any logical steps that we can set in motion that humans don't have to insert themselves into the equation is going to be very beneficial. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I'll just go over it real quick. The reason that we want to take a look at mitigating some of these pain points is all the benefits that it gives us. So it's a really good way of eliminating errors or vastly reducing them, ability to maintain accountability, who did what. You can establish really high levels of reporting and auditing and oversight. It also provides a platform for collaboration, and sometimes that collaboration means we work together, and sometimes that collaboration means I can't do this task right now. I'm going to hand it off to another person so they can complete it. And all of these things that we do to convert manual steps into automated logic is going to reduce our level of effort, the amount of time it takes to do these tasks. It's going to give you transparency, and from top to bottom, you're going to get a huge improvement in the user experience. So it's a win-win situation for everybody. So we're going to be looking at ways to relieve pain in both identity administration and identity governance, which are two separate but integrated components of identity fabric operations. So we're going to start out with identity administration, which is the workhorse of provisioning and fulfillment. And I have a few common examples of ways that we can automate and streamline things to relieve pain. So one of the top ones, of course, is on day one, when you hire a new person, when they show up, they should have the rights that they need, that birthright, that day one provisioning. We're going to make that as automated as possible. And we're going to continue that through to day 2 and day 200 and day 2000 as their roles changes, grow, shrink, move, evolve over time. All that needs to be automated. And also data federation. You have lots of connected systems. They may be other identity providers, application providers, SaaS offerings, etc., that all have a role to play in your identity fabric. We want to make sure that important data is used, leveraged, and shared between all those different components. We want to automate all of that. And we also want to provide tooling to make problem handling really simple. So if you have data quality issues that need to be reconciled quickly, or if you're in a risk situation where you feel like there is potential compromise, you really need to take steps fast. We want to make sure that we automate that and give you the tooling to take immediate action on that. Okay, our first example out of the ones I gave you is day one provisioning. We want to make sure that our new employees get online and have the rights and privileges that they need to do their jobs right away. And that could be extremely varied. You know, they have applications and tools that they need to be able to get to. They might need a parking pass, you know, or a building pass or things like that. All of those are components that ought to be automated. In this particular example, we have a little open source HR system to which we are bringing in new hires. So we're creating an account now for a new hire named Archie Langley. He's going to start work in 2 weeks, or whenever. And like any HR system, we're just going to get his basic information that he's provided to us so far, which is name, address, phone number, email address, date of birth, social security number, whatever that base information is that you collect at first. And then we're going to go to a little further step. This HR system is aware of our organizational structures and hierarchy and the roles and titles within our organization. So we can go ahead and assign him to the right business unit in the right location, geolocation. We can make sure he's assigned to the manager we know he's going to be reporting to, and have the right department and the right title. And all of this is information that could be used in our identity fabric system. So we've created him in HR, and so we're immediately going to go over to our source of truth, our identity vault, where we have immediately created a unique object for this user. So you can see Archie Langley is in here, and this is a real-time demo. I haven't edited this to kind of magic time or anything. And so within seconds, he's instantiated within the identity vault, and within a minute or less, we have reached out to one of our attached resources, which happens to be Active Directory. And if we search for Archie, we see that Archie Langley has already been created in Active Directory. And if we go into the organizational unit that he's supposed to be in, which is the Americas, we will find him in the correct organizational unit. And if we look at his properties, as you would expect, we brought over his name, address, all the information that came in from the HR system. But most importantly, he's a member of the right groups from day one. And we want that to happen throughout the life cycle of his role in our corporation. So, when he joins, he gets the right group memberships, he gets the right entitlements, he gets in the right business roles, he gets the right access, and as he moves jobs, all that moves with him. In the next set of demonstrations, we're going to take a look at how to reduce the pain when your risk goes up. So your risk might go up because of data integrity issues. Perhaps you have records that may or may not be duplicates. Or your risk may be going up because you've got a potentially compromised user and you need to take very quick action to mitigate that situation. So in identity administration, we built 3 little workflows with a form front end to make sure that we can very quickly and painlessly take care of these particular situations. So in this example, we have a workflow that we call New User Conflict Resolution. We have an existing user in the Identity Vault named William Chris Smith. He has birthday of November 3rd and a social security number. And then a newly attached system brings in a record that's super similar. It's a Will Smith, same birthday, maybe the social security number has been fat-fingered. So it's handed off to an identity admin. They do their check to see what's up. If it's a new user, they say so, it'll create a new employee ID. If it's the same user, they can go in and they can fix the fat finger and then merge the data. Well, that's great. But what if we have a user who's been compromised? We might want to take very quick steps to make sure that we mitigate that danger. So we have this workflow called Terminate User. With Terminate User, we can choose someone by their employee ID or by their first or last name, look them up in the Identity Vault, and then choose either to deprovision them, cut off access, or to put them in legal hold, which is a little more complicated workflow, where there are more steps where you have to, maybe lock their data. You might have to take a snapshot of the current request. You might have to escalate to other people in the organization. Deprovision is pretty simple. We're just cutting off access to their current entitlements. And so that'll go out, it'll conduct its operations behind the scenes, it'll report back if it's failed or succeeded. So that's great, they will no longer have future access. But what if they are so risky that we need to cut out any current access? So we have terminate session workflow for that. And so any application that can accept an API call to cut a current session, we can choose that application, choose the user and say, you know what, just kill it. And it'll make the API call, it'll bring back the results of succeed or fail. If succeed, great, that's all you need. If it failed, then it can be further escalated through another step in the workflow. And these are just 3 examples of the way you build a workflow to take the steps, and you have a form up front to make sure that the right steps are being taken and to report back the correct level of results. Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We've been talking about streamlining and automating operations in identity administration. Now we're going to switch over to the other part of Identity Fabric, identity governance, and we're going to take a look at how that we can make things much more dynamic and pain-free over there. A few common examples here is we don't want our membership to business roles to be static. We want it to be dynamic. I'm going to show you the way that we have that with our built-in logic and policies and flows inside of business role assignments. The meat and potatoes of identity governance is access reviews, attestation reviews. We have lots of reasons for being able to prove what someone's access is, maybe to underwriters, auditors, etc. We want to make that as easy, as streamlined, error-free, and repeatable as possible. Also, we're an event-driven architecture, so an event occurs that needs additional oversight or needs someone to scrutinize what's going on, we can call micro-certification. Say, hey, this event occurred, it seems a little off, it's anomalous, it's risky, whatever the case may be. Let's just do a really quick micro-certification on that. 80% of the time, 90% of the time, our built-in default workflows and forms are going to do all the work that you need them to do. But every once in a while, you're going to have a more complex or a deeper set of oversight that's needed for, let's say, an approval request. You may need to contact external systems to get information to make good decisions. You may have more people reviewing it and auditing it and getting reported to. And you can do that all through a set of custom workflows and custom forms to make sure that they're doing everything that you need them to do in a very logical manner. And one of the beauties of the NetIQ solution is that our different identity modules, they're integrated. So if one of our workflows in the identity governance says, hey, go check the access on this, and if they don't have access, let's fulfill an access request. Or if they do have access when they don't, let's deprovision that. And that's the job for identity administration, our fulfillment workhorse. So you can just hand that off to the workflow that's already in identity administration. It'll do the work for you. It'll come back and let you know how it did. It's really an elegant solution. As I mentioned previously, one of the things we want to do is we want to make sure we have an automated, dynamic way of getting people in and out of business roles. Business roles is a way to hand out entitlements and applications and permissions to users in our organization because of the role that they have in here. And we're going to be able to marry role-based access and attribute access in the way that this automated logic happens. So in this particular case, in this demonstration, we're going to go out to our policies for business roles. And I have a few business roles already built in this lab environment. I recently built one called Office of Administration Directors. And I built this specifically so that I can hand out an application that only people at the director level should have access to. And you'll notice there I can assign a risk score here. And since this is a pretty sensitive data, I might want to have that at a moderate or moderately high level of risk. And I've chosen the application that I want to hand out to them. And I can also enumerate the permissions that are in that application manifest and decide which of those permissions I'm handing out and which of those I am going to reserve. So you have a lot of granular control over what you entitle people to because they belong to a business role. So I can do any combination of applications, any combination of permissions within that. Now, who gets it? In this particular case, if you're a director, I want you to be in this role. So this is super simple. I just look at your title, and if it has the word director in it, if that characteristic, if that attribute is present, you belong here. And then I can click the button and say, well, who is that? Well, I picked up 31 different people who have the title of director. And if that looks good, I can just accept that as a good membership role. Or I can go back and say, I missed some people. Let me add some logic to get my C-level executives. Or there are some people in there I don't want to be in there. So, I really only meant this for people in North America and Europe. I didn't want Asia Pac in there. So I can go in and put an exclusion role in there and say, yeah, but. And you have a very, very high level of control and granularity over what you hand out, who you hand it out to, and it's not static. Okay, so these are mutable objects in your catalog, and if they change in the catalog, it will immediately make a change in who belongs to that business role. And that's really the entire idea behind governance and the way that it does policy, whether it's access request policy or a policy for doing certification of access, if it's an approval policy, all of the policies, separation of duty policies, all the policy engines in there are built to automate all of the logic and all the steps that go in to making the right set of decisions and the right set of actions to get the right results that you need and to remove human error and lack of comprehensiveness out of what you may have previously had for conducting these kind of operations. In this next section, I just want to take a few minutes to take a look at an access review policy so that you can see how comprehensive it is, how we've automated all the different steps and notifications so that everybody is aware of everything that's happening in an access review at all times. So in this particular example, if I'm going out to my catalog, I can take a look at all the different review definitions that I have for doing an access review. And I have a very simple one put in here, and it's once or twice a year. I have everybody who's a manager or supervisor validate who their direct reports are. So I just call this the direct reports review policy, and for this I can select who it's targeted at. That could be very specific managers like Lenore Silva, or I can add additional managers, or I could put logic in there that says anyone who has a manager in their title, or I could do the entire company, and I can make it a very impactful review. In this particular case, it's quite targeted. So I specifically wanted Lenore Silver to review her people. She has 7 people that review her, so if I kick this off, it's not going to have a lot of impact. But there's also another manager that who's rather new. I want to make sure that they get a chance to validate everybody who's reporting to them. So I just do a lookup in the system for Alexis Hernandez. I add her in, and then I can click the button again and say, what's the impact of this going to be? And as you can see, it's not that much more impactful. She's got another 8 people that report to her. And under the review options, I have lots of power over what gets reviewed and what doesn't get reviewed. So for instance, I'm going to allow them to reassign tasks. I'm going to allow owners to override decisions. So, maybe I say one thing, but the owner says, no, that's not right. They can then change it. I can enable comments. I can also say, reviewers, you can't go and just, bulk approve everything. You got to go in, manager by manager. So I've got a lot of power in that regard. I also can determine who's going to be monitoring these reviews. So the review owner always has the ability to do that. I can add anybody else in there that I need to review that, either by user object or by group object, right? I can also add additional reviewers or determine who the reviewer is going to be. By this, it's by the supervisor, but again, I could say, I want other people to review it, or I want to assign it to a business role, right? So, I might send it to my directors, the one I just showed you previously. And so because of this, I've got a lot of control over who has oversight. I have a lot of control on when everything gets due and when it gets escalated. I have a lot of control over how long this review should take and when it expires and what's going to happen at the end of that review expiry. If they don't take action, what am I going to do about it? I'm just going to leave things alone. Am I going to delegate it to another person? I have lots of power over the way things happen during a review. Also, if nothing happens, can I just accept the status quo? So throughout this, we have all the right things going on, and we're also reporting everything that's going on. So we have a ton of notifications that we send out. So when we kick it off and when it's over, and we send out reminders, and we let people know when things need to be escalated and when things are completed, and so we have a whole lot of transparency through this process. And anybody who's involved in the review process has access transparently to all these steps that are happening. And I can schedule a review for when it begins and when it ends and when it expires, and and configure other things about the way it looks. And what I'm trying to get across to you here is there is a lot of automated logic behind the scenes of these access reviews that you can just take advantage of because it's built into the identity governance process. Now, as I mentioned before, our default workflows and forms are going to take care of the vast bulk of the operations that you need to conduct in your identity fabric. However, there are going to be times when more needs to be done, more oversight, more reporting, more reviewers, more steps. You may need contacting external systems for information so good decisions can be made. So I have an example here of creating a custom workflow to take the steps that we need for elevated oversight, and also a form for the people who are doing the approvals to make sure that all those steps are followed and that all the right information and criteria are met before we go handing out that kind of access. So in this particular example, I just wanted to show you real quick the way we hand out the ability to manipulate workflows. And we do that through authorization assignments in identity governance. As you can see, we have a lot of separation of duties built right into the governance solution. And at the very last of the list are anyone who is a workflow administrator will have the ability to modify custom workflows and forms. So we've added a user named Ella Belafonte. And because we've added that to her, when she logs onto the system, she'll now have the ability to create custom workflows and forms. So she has access to this thing called the workflow dashboard. And she can get to the forms, the workflows, the templates. And in here, she's created a brand new workflow. It's called a data storage approval workflow. And any application and application data that is monitored by a data store is for a reason. It's because it's sensitive information. And we want to make sure that all the right steps are involved along the way to make sure that we have the right amount of oversight and information coming into the system. So I'm just going to take a real quick minute to show you some of the steps here. So most of this logic was a default logic tree that she just used. It's called a decision support logic tree. And this covered most of what she needed to have done. So when this workflow kicks off, when someone says, hey, I'm trying to get to this application that's managed by a data store. So it kicks off this workflow, and the first thing it does is it goes out to that person's supervisor and says, are you going to let this happen? And the supervisor can say yes or no. Or they at least get informed, in this particular case, that it's happening. And then the next thing that happens is it's going to go out and see if there's an available license for this piece of software, because maybe it's expensive or highly controlled. And so it can go out to the licensing system, it can make an API call and say, hey, do you have licenses? In fact, it can say, do you have a lot of licenses or do you have very few licenses? And then it can make decisions based on the results that come back. So if it has 200 out of 500 licenses available, it may continue down the potential approvals track. If it only has 5 licenses out of 500, it may pause for a minute and say, hey, let's go out and see if we need to get more licenses. So contact the right people, and it could pause the process until then. Or if you're out of licenses, it can automatically deny it. So there's a lot of logic that you can build into that. And then eventually, once it gets past the license stage, then it can go out to the first tier approver. And the first tier approver, maybe that's the application owner, and they go, okay, is this the right person? Do I think they have all the criteria met that they need to get to this application? And then they could say yay or nay, and then it goes to the second approver, who's probably the data steward, and they have the same thing. Do they meet the criteria? Did they get the preceding approvals okay? Do I think this is all kosher? And if so, then they can say yay or nay. And so at any point that somebody says nay, it branches off into the denied workflow, and if it continues to be approved all the way along, it's into the approval workflow, and then it'll inform identity governance the results of that process, whether it's ultimately approved or ultimately denied. And then what Emma did is she also inserted a step after that, which was the notify the security officer, because in her view, the data that she's controlling is so sensitive that the security officer should always know. They should know anytime someone requests it, and they should also know whether or not they were denied or approved for that. And so she just added that extra little step on top of that. One of the things that she did here is she created a custom form for the approval, and she's attached that form to the approver's workflow. So, when she clicks on that first approver, if you look at the form that she's using, it's called the data stored approval form. And the second approver, we could have a separate form for him, but he actually has the same form because they're both looking at the same criteria. If they had different criteria, we'd probably build different forms. But because of that, all of these objects, they're available over here on the left side. Starts and stops and people and forms and, let me go and query for information. Let me send out an email. All these are available to build as complex of a logic tree as you need to. As I mentioned, workflow can be customized, and the form that is used to conduct that workflow can also be customized. So in this particular example, Emma Belafonte, who created the custom workflow, is also creating a custom form for the reviewers of that request approval. So she'll go into identity governance, and she'll go into the workflow dashboard, the workflow console, and she'll be able to create and modify a specialized form for this, because we want to make sure that the form and the workflow both work together to make this as informative and as easy to work with as possible. So in this particular case, the data steward approval form is pretty simple. It'll tell you who requested it, who the recipient of the approval will be. That's not necessarily the same person, and whatever reason they supplied for making the request in the first place. So those fields are just filled in from data we got from the request itself. And then there's an interactive section here where the approver can say, were the criteria met? Did they get the supervisor approval? Had they had the requisite training? Do I have licenses available for this? If all those things are true, they can check the boxes, and then they can feel justified in doing the approval. In this particular case, if they go out and see they haven't done the training, they just say training not complete, and they'll click deny. So Emma's pretty happy with this form, but she realizes that it would be helpful to the approval if they actually knew who the supervisor was. So she'll just add a field in here for whoever the recipient supervisor was, so that when the approver gets this form, they can say, okay, I can see who requested it, I can see who's the recipient, I can see who their supervisor is, and I can see the rationale. And then if they have questions, they can contact any one of those three people and ask their questions. As far as the interactive checkboxes go, quite often, instead of those being interactive checkboxes, those will just be results field from calls we make to other systems. So it doesn't, I've kind of shown it here for visual impact. But really, if I wanted to know if licenses were available, I'd make an API call, and I'd get the results back. Yes, lots of licenses. No, not many licenses. No licenses. Therefore, I'm killing the process. I can go out to the training system, say, are they registered as having passed this training? If so, bring a result back. And also, when the supervisor approves it up front, that can just be passed forward as a result too. So it doesn't have to be interactive. I just wanted to show you that as a feature. And so because of this, Emma gets the form she wants. It follows the logic of the workflow that's behind the scenes, and it's just making it easier and more pain-free for everybody. Thanks so much for attending my presentation today. I hope this was helpful, showed you some of the ways we can really relieve the pain. If you have more questions, you can contact us at OpenText at any time. Thanks again.